Information goes in, gets stored, retrieved when needed. More storage equals more knowledge. Your brain is a hard drive. Learning is downloading data. That's memorization, and it's completely wrong. Hold up the tree branches. This is how learning actually works. New growth branches from existing structure. Each new piece connects to what's already there. The tree grows stronger, more capable, more integrated. Nothing is stored in isolation. Everything is connected, living, growing. Put them down. Richard Feynman understood this. He never memorized, not because he couldn't, but because he recognized that memorization isn't learning. Memorization is storage. Learning is growth. And that distinction, that fundamental difference between storing information and growing understanding, that's why he could solve problems others couldn't. Why his knowledge was usable instead of just recitable. Why decades after learning something, he could still apply it. A direct address or right now, you probably memorize. Not because you want to, but because that's what you were taught. School taught you to memorize. Tests rewarded memorization. Success meant retaining information. And it's destroying your ability to actually learn. Because every hour spent memorizing is an hour not spent building understanding. Every fact crammed into storage is knowledge that will disappear within weeks. Every test passed through memorization is education wasted. Today, I'm going to show you how smart minds actually learn. Not through memorization, through something completely different. Something that creates understanding that lasts, knowledge that's usable, capability that grows over time. Because memorization is not just inefficient, it's the wrong approach entirely. And once you see what real learning looks like, you'll never mistake memorization for learning again. Walk across stage. Let me start with a story that reveals the difference. It's the 1960s. Feynman is teaching introductory physics at Caltech. First day of class, and he does something unusual. He asks his students, brilliant students, top of their high schools, perfect test scores, he asks them to define energy. Share the responses pasa, and they give him textbook definitions. Word for word. Energy is the capacity to do work. Energy is conserved in closed systems. Perfect recitation. Exactly what they memorized. And Feynman says, okay, but what is it? Not what's the definition. What is energy? What does that word actually refer to? The silence is silence. They don't know. They can define it. They can recite principles about it. They've memorized extensive information about energy, but they don't know what it is. His demonstration, and so Feynman shows them, not by giving them a better definition, but by building their understanding from scratch. A ball on a shelf. It can fall. When it falls, it can move things, hit things, push things. That ability, that's energy. The ball has it when it's high, uses it when it falls, transfers it when it hits something. It continuous water behind a dam, it can flow. When it flows, it can turn turbines, generate electricity. That ability, that's energy. Different form, same concept. The water has potential, can do things. That potential is energy. The transformation. And suddenly, the students get it. Not a definition, an understanding. They know what energy is. Not what it's called. Not what the textbook says about it. But what it actually is. They make the distinction. That's the difference. That's learning versus memorization. Memorization energy is the capacity to do work words. Recitable. Meaningless. Learning building a mental model. Understanding what the word points to. Seeing it in multiple contexts. Knowing it deeply enough to recognize it everywhere. Fact, direct statement. And Feynman never memorized. He only learned. He built understanding. Always. Without exception. Present the framework key. So how do smart minds learn? What's the actual process that creates understanding instead of memorization? Let me show you the 4 stages. The progression that turns information into genuine knowledge. The way Feynman approached everything he learned. Stage 1, build a mental model. This is where learning begins. Not with memorization, with model building. Creating an internal representation of how something works. Explain a mental model is a simplified version of reality that lets you reason about something. It's not perfect, but it's functional. It lets you predict, explain, understand. Make it concrete, learning how atoms work. Don't memorize. Atoms consist of a nucleus containing protons and neutrons, surrounded by electrons in orbitals. Build a model, picture a tiny solar system. Nucleus in the center, electrons orbiting. Not accurate, but functional. Gives you something to think with. Then refined electrons aren't really orbiting. They're more like clouds, probability distributions. Refine the model. Now it's more accurate but still usable. I give Feynman example. Feynman learning quantum mechanics, he didn't memorize equations. He built visual models, mental pictures of what was happening. Particles as waves, probability amplitudes, interference patterns. Those models weren't complete representations, but they were enough to think with, to reason with, to solve problems with. Make the contrast to memorization gives you words. Model building gives you understanding you can use. You can't think with memorized words. You can only recite them, but you can think with models, manipulate them, apply them, extend them. The practice. When you encounter new information, don't try to memorize it. Ask, what's the model? What's actually happening? How does this work? What would I see? Build a mental picture. Create a functional representation, something you can think with. Act stage 2, stage 2. Connect to existing knowledge. Learning isn't adding isolated facts. It's integrating new understanding into existing structure, like the tree. New growth branches from what's already there. Isaac explained your brain is a network. Everything you know is connected to everything else. When you learn something new, you're not adding a separate piece. You're connecting it to the network, creating links, building bridges. And those are make it concrete. Learning about photosynthesis, don't memorize as an isolated process. Connect it. This is like the solar panels on my roof. Both convert light to usable energy. Different mechanisms, same general principle. This is why plants are green. They're reflecting the light they don't use. The red and blue light gets absorbed. This connects to the food chain. This is where energy enters biological systems. And so the results are, now photosynthesis isn't isolated. It's connected to solar energy, to color, to ecosystems. That web of connections makes it memorable, makes it usable, makes it part of your understanding. Give Feynman example, and Feynman connected everything, physics to biology, math to physical reality, abstract concepts to concrete examples. Nothing was isolated. Everything fit into an integrated understanding. That's why his knowledge was so applicable, because it was all connected. He could see relationships others missed, apply concepts across domains, transfer understanding. Make the contrast of memorization creates isolated facts. Disconnected, floating free, easy to forget, hard to use. Learning creates integrated knowledge. Connected, part of a web, reinforced by multiple links. Naturally applicable. The practice, when you learn something new, ask, what does this connect to? What do I already know that's similar? How does this fit into what I understand? What relationships can I see? Build connections. Create links. Integrate new knowledge into existing structure. A Fox stage 3 test by reconstruction. Here's where most people go wrong. They test their learning by recognition. Do I recognize this when I see it? That tests memorization, not understanding. Smart minds test by reconstruction. Can I rebuild this from first principles? Can I derive it? Can I explain it without looking? Can I explain the difference? Recognition is easy. Your brain is good at recognizing familiar patterns. But recognition doesn't mean understanding. You recognize your friend's face. But can you draw it from memory? Probably not, because recognition and reconstruction are different capabilities. Errors apply to learning aids. You recognize a formula when you see it. Oh yes, FTMO. But can you derive why that's true? Can you explain where it comes from? Can you reconstruct it from basic principles? If yes, you understand. If no, you've memorized, not learned. Give Feynman example. Feynman never just accepted formulas. He derived them from first principles, every time, until he could reconstruct them without looking. That's how he knew he understood. Not because he could recognize them, but because he could rebuild them. I'll share his test. Can I explain this to someone who knows nothing about it, without looking at notes, using only simple words? If yes, understanding is real. If no, more work needed. Make it practical. After studying something, close the book. Get a blank page. Reconstruct what you learned. Explain it, derive it, build it from scratch. Where you get stuck, that's where your understanding is weak. That's what you need to learn better. Hes continui. This is completely different from memorization testing. Can I recite this versus can I rebuild this? Recitation tests storage, reconstruction tests understanding. Hacking stage 4. Apply to novel situations. The ultimate test, the final stage. Can you take what you've learned and apply it to something you've never seen before? Explain if you've memorized, you can only handle familiar situations. Ones that match what you memorized. Novel situations break you. You don't know what to do. But if you've learned, built models, created connections, tested by reconstruction, you can handle novelty. Because you understand the underlying principles. You can apply them flexibly. I say make it concrete. You memorized how to solve a specific type of math problem. You can solve that exact type. But change one parameter, one condition, one aspect, and you're lost. Because you memorized the procedure, not the principle. But if you understand the mathematics, the actual concepts, the real principles, you can handle variations, novel problems, things you've never seen. Because you're applying understanding, not reciting procedures. As I give Feynman an example, Feynman's genius wasn't solving problems he'd seen before. It was solving problems nobody had seen before. Problems that didn't fit existing categories. Problems that required applying principles in new ways. He could do that because he understood principles, not just memorized solutions. He could take what he knew and apply it creatively to novelty. Make the practice after learning something. Find novel applications, problems you haven't seen, situations that don't exactly match the examples. Force yourself to apply the principles creatively. That's where real understanding is tested. That's where you discover if you learned or just memorized, or could bring stages together. So those are the 4 stages. 1. Build a mental model. 2. Connect to existing knowledge. 3. Test by reconstruction. 4. Apply to novel situations. Facts make the contrasty. That's learning, real learning. Completely different from memorization. Memorization store information. Recognize it. Recite it. Apply it to familiar situations. Learning build models. Create connections. Reconstruct from principles. Apply flexibly to novelty. Advise or share the transformation. Let me tell you about someone who made this shift. Call him David. David was a medical student. Top of his class. Perfect memory. Could memorize anything. Thousands of facts, drugs, diseases, procedures, all stored perfectly. And he was failing as a doctor. The problem, in clinic, patients didn't present like textbook cases. Symptoms were ambiguous. Multiple conditions overlapped. Nothing fit the memorized patterns exactly. And David was lost. He knew so many facts, but he couldn't apply them because he'd memorized, not learned. He had storage, not understanding. The crisis. His supervisor told him, "You know more facts than I do. But I'm a better doctor." Why? Because I understand medicine. You've just memorized it. That was devastating, but true. The transformation. So David started over, stopped memorizing, started learning, using the 4 stages. His process stage 1, build models. For every disease, he'd ask, what's actually happening in the body? Not the definition, the mechanism, the process. Heart failure not, produced cardiac output with fluid retention. But the heart muscle is weak, can't pump effectively. Blood backs up, fluid accumulates. Build a mechanical model. Continue your stage 2 connect. How does heart failure relate to other conditions? What's similar? What's different? How do systems interact? Connects to kidney function, to lung capacity, to blood pressure, to medication effects. Everything linked. Integrated, not isolated, continues her stage 3 reconstruct. Close the textbook. Explain the disease from first principles. What's happening? Why? What would you see? What would you do? Where he gets stuck, he knows his understanding is weak. Goes back. Builds better model. Tries again. Continue. Stage 4, apply to novel cases, real patients, messy presentations. Nothing textbook. Force himself to apply principles flexibly. Reason through ambiguity. The result, 6 months later, David was a different doctor. Still didn't have perfect recall of every fact, but he understood medicine, could reason through novel cases, could apply principles flexibly, could actually help patients. Make the point not because he memorized better, because he stopped memorizing and started learning. They present the deeper truth. Now let me show you why memorization fails and learning succeeds. The actual neuroscience, the way your brain works. Third, explain memory types. Your brain has different types of memory. Short-term memory, temporary storage. That's where memorization lives. Fragile, easily lost, doesn't integrate. And long-term memory, integrated knowledge. That's where learning lives. Durable, connected. Functional, or make the distinction. When you memorize, you're using short-term memory, cramming facts into temporary storage. They might last through the test. Maybe a few weeks, then gone. When you learn, build models, create connections, test by reconstruction, You're building long-term integrated knowledge. It lasts, it's usable, it's actually there when you need it. Isaac shared the mechanism. Long-term memory formation requires understanding, connection, active reconstruction, application. Exactly the 4 stages of learning. Your brain literally requires those processes to create durable knowledge. Memorization bypasses those processes, so it creates weak, temporary storage instead of strong, permanent understanding. Effects make it biological. This isn't about willpower or discipline. It's about brain biology. Your brain wasn't designed for memorization. It was designed for understanding, for model building, for connection, for reconstruction. Use memorization and you're fighting your brain's design. Use learning and you're working with it. Address the school problem. So why do schools teach memorization? If learning is so much better, why does education focus on storage and recall? Ahar explained, because memorization is easy to test. Multiple choice. Short answer. Fill in the blank. Can you recognize this? Can you recite that? Easy to grade, easy to standardize, easy to scale. Learning is hard to test. How do you test model building? How do you measure integrated understanding? How do you grade reconstruction ability? It's subjective, time-consuming, hard to standardize.
Hey, make the point.
So schools optimize for what's easy to test. Memorization, not what actually creates capability. Learning. And students learn to optimize for tests, memorize for the exam, forget after, repeat, the consequence of 12 years of education. 16 if you count college. And most of what you learned is gone, because it was memorized, not learned. Stored temporarily, not understood permanently. The liberation. But you don't have to learn that way. You're not being graded anymore. You're not taking standardized tests. You're learning for your own capability, so you can use methods that actually work. Methods that create real understanding. Methods that build knowledge that lasts. Present practical strategies. Let me give you specific strategies. Ways to ensure you're learning, not memorizing. FAR strategy 1, never highlight or underline. This feels productive, but it's passive. It's not processing. You're just marking text. No model building, no connecting, no reconstructing. Instead, after reading a section, close the book. Write a summary in your own words. Explain what you just read. Reconstruct it. That forces actual processing. That creates learning. Strategy 2. Always explain to someone else. The Feynman technique. Explain what you're learning to someone who knows nothing about it. Use simple words. No jargon. If you can do it, you understand. If you can't, you've just memorized words without grasping concepts. Strategy 3. Create your own problems. Don't just solve given problems. Create new ones. Take the principle you've learned and apply it to different situations. Novel contexts, things not in the textbook. That tests whether you understand the principle or just memorize the procedure. Hatter's strategy 4. Build analogies and metaphors. Take what you're learning and connect it to something completely different. What's it like? How is it similar to things you already know? Analogies force you to understand the underlying structure, the deep patterns. Can't create analogies through memorization. The strategy 5, wait before reviewing. This feels wrong, but it works. After learning something, wait, don't review immediately. Wait a day, a week, then reconstruct from memory. That forces your brain to consolidate, to integrate, to move from temporary storage to permanent understanding. Strategy 6, embrace forgetting. When you forget something, that's not failure. That's information. It shows you what wasn't properly learned, what needs better understanding. Relearn it. But this time, build a better model, create stronger connections, test more thoroughly. That forgetting, relearning cycle creates deeper understanding than getting it right once through memorization. Share the meta principle. Here's the meta principle behind all these strategies. Learning requires effort, requires active processing, requires struggle. Memorization is passive, easy, comfortable, and ineffective. I make the distinction. If learning feels easy, you're probably memorizing. If it feels difficult, challenging, effortful, you're probably actually learning. Don't avoid the difficulty. Embrace it. That difficulty is your brain building real understanding. Give Feynman's perspective. Feynman said, "What I cannot create, I do not understand." Creating, building models, making connections, reconstructing from principles, that's learning. That's understanding. If you haven't created your own understanding, you haven't learned. You've just stored someone else's words. Tamra tell final story. Let me end with one more story. This one shows the ultimate difference between memorization and learning. Feynman is visiting his son's elementary school, observing a science class. The teacher is teaching about the Tyrannosaurus rex. That's the memorization approach where teacher asks, "Who can tell me what this dinosaur is called?" Our kids raise hands excitedly. Tyrannosaurus rex! Very good! And what does Tyrannosaurus rex mean? Tyrant lizard killing. You all know your dinosaurs. Hake's Feynman's observation. And Feynman realizes they know nothing about dinosaurs. They've memorized names. But they don't know what a Tyrannosaurus rex was, how it lived, what it ate, how it hunted. What made it different from other dinosaurs? They can recite labels, but they haven't learned anything about actual dinosaurs. Hey, his alternative is ours or later. He talks to his son. What do you know about the Tyrannosaurus rex? It was a tyrant lizard king. Okay, but what does that mean? What was it really? What did it do? I don't know. That's just what it's called. The teaching of? So Feynman shows him, not more names. Understanding. This was a huge predator, bigger than a bus. Had tiny arms but massive jaws. Could bite through bone. Hunted other dinosaurs. Was at the top of the food chain. Nothing hunted it. It hunted everything else. Now his son knows something about Tyrannosaurus rex. Not just the label. The actual thing. What it was. How it lived. That's the lesson, and that's the difference. That's learning versus memorization. Memorization, know the name. Recite the label. Pass the quiz. Forget immediately. Learning, understand the thing. Build a model. Make connections. Retain permanently. A7 walk to center. So here's what you need to understand. Stop memorizing. It's not learning. It's storage. Temporary. Useless. Wasteful. Start direct statement. Start learning. Build models. Create connections. Reconstruct from principles. Apply to novelty. That's how smart minds actually learn. That's how Feynman learned. That's how genuine understanding is created. The 4 stages again to build mental models. Connect to existing knowledge. Test by reconstruction. Apply to novel situations. Here's the promise to do this and your learning transforms. From temporary storage to permanent understanding. From facts you'll forget to knowledge you can use. From memorization to genuine capability. Hey, my final challenges. So here's my challenge. Take something you're trying to learn right now. Something you've been memorizing. Stop. Throw away the flashcards. Forget about memorizing the definitions. Instead, build understanding. What's the mental model? What connections can you make? Can you reconstruct from principles? Can you apply to novel situations? As or make the prediction, it will be harder, more effortful, more challenging than memorization. But it will actually work. The understanding will stick. The knowledge will be usable. The learning will be real. Final statement. Smart minds don't memorize, they learn. They build. They connect. They understand. Pause. Stop memorizing. Start learning. Thank you. RBT. If you want to understand more about Feynman's approach to learning, the specific techniques he used, the detailed methods for building understanding instead of memorizing, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how to actually learn, how to build genuine understanding, how to create knowledge that lasts. Join us. Let's stop memorizing and start learning together. See you in the next one. The sun is always shining, the light is always there, scattered, diffuse, harmless. But focus that light, concentrate it into a single point, and suddenly it becomes dangerous. It burns, it creates fire. Same light, same energy, different result. Put down the props, look directly at audience. Your mind works the same way. Right now, your attention is scattered, jumping from thought to thought, distracted by notifications, split across multiple concerns, diffuse, harmless, ordinary. But focus that same mind, concentrate it into a single point, and suddenly it becomes dangerous. It solves problems others can't solve. It sees patterns others miss. It creates insights that seem like genius, and same mind, same intelligence, different result. Direct address. The difference between an ordinary mind and a dangerous mind isn't IQ, isn't education, isn't even talent. It's focus. The ability to concentrate mental energy into a single point with such intensity that barriers dissolve, problems crack open, and insights emerge. Richard Feynman had this ability, not because he was born with a special brain, but because he developed a specific skill. A skill so powerful that it turned his ordinary mind into one of the most dangerous minds of the 20th century. Ein Lehnenixe today. I'm going to teach you that skill. The focus skill that turns ordinary minds dangerous. And I'm going to show you exactly how to develop it, starting immediately. Because you have the same mental horsepower as Feynman, the same cognitive capacity, the same potential. What you're missing is the ability to focus that power into a concentrated beam instead of letting it scatter into uselessness. Kepoisava walk across stage. Let me start with a story that reveals this skill in action. It's 1965. Feynman is working on quantum electrodynamics. Incredibly complex problem. The mathematics is so difficult that most physicists can't even follow his papers, let alone contribute. And someone asks him, how do you solve these impossible problems? What makes you able to see things other physicists can't? Hack share his answer, and Feynman says something that seems too simple to be the answer. I just think about it constantly, completely, with my full attention, for months sometimes, years, until the problem reveals itself. Make the point, that's it. That's the skill. Complete, sustained, intense focus on a single problem, not genius. Not special mathematics ability. Focus. But here's what most people don't understand. That kind of focus isn't normal. That kind of focus is a developed skill. Most people can't maintain complete attention on anything for more than a few minutes before their mind wanders. After to get intense, Feynman could focus on a single problem for hours, days, months, with his full mental capacity concentrated on that one thing. No distractions, no mind wandering, no scattered attention. That's what made him dangerous. That's what let him solve impossible problems. Not smarter, more focused. At present, the core insight key. Here's what you need to understand. Your mind has enormous power, but that power is almost always scattered, diffuse, spread thin across 1,000 different things, notifications, worries, plans, memories, distractions, thoughts bouncing from one thing to another. Your attention never stays in one place long enough to generate real power. To make the analogies, it's like that sunlight. Scattered, it's just ambient light, harmless, ordinary. But focused through a magnifying glass, it creates fire, burns through paper. Same energy, different configuration. Your scattered attention is ordinary, but focused attention becomes dangerous, solves problems, creates insights, achieves results that seem impossible. A direct statement, and the difference between ordinary and dangerous isn't how much mental energy you have. It's whether you can focus that energy. Fact present the skill breakdown. So let me break down the focus skill. The specific components that Feynman mastered. The things you need to develop to turn your ordinary mind dangerous. Component 1, sustained attention. Most people can focus for short bursts, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 20 if it's really interesting. Then their attention drifts. They need a break. They check their phone. They think about something else. Make the contrast. Feynman could sustain focus for hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours sometimes. His attention would stay locked on a single problem with unwavering intensity. Not effortlessly, it took skill, but he developed that skill through practice. Explain what this enables. Why does sustained attention matter? Because deep problems require deep thinking. You can't solve complex problems in 5-minute bursts. You need to hold the entire problem in your mind. All the pieces, all the relationships, all the constraints, simultaneously. That requires sustained attention. The ability to keep your mind focused on one thing long enough for patterns to emerge, for connections to form, for insights to develop. Pass and give example. Feynman working on a physics problem. He'd sit at his desk. He'd think for hours, not writing much, not doing calculations, just thinking, holding the problem in his mind, turning it over, examining it from different angles, maintaining complete focus. And after hours, sometimes many hours, something would click. A pattern would emerge. An insight would form. The problem would crack open. I starts make the point. That insight didn't come in the first 5 minutes. It came after hours of sustained focus. Most people never get there because they can't sustain attention that long. Their mind wanders after 10 minutes. They check their phone after 20. They give up after 30. They never reach the depth where real insights live. Component 2, exclusive attention. This is different from sustained attention. This is about eliminating distractions, about making your focus exclusive to one thing. Nothing else gets attention. Fear explain. Most people practice divided attention. They're working on something, but they're also monitoring email, checking texts, listening to music. thinking about other things. Their attention is split. Even if they sustain attention on one thing for a while, they're not giving it exclusive attention. Part of their mind is elsewhere. Make the contrast. Feynman practiced exclusive attention when he was thinking about a problem. That problem got 100% of his cognitive capacity, nothing else. No distractions, no divided attention, complete exclusivity. A separate share example, people would talk to him while he was thinking. He wouldn't hear them, not because he was rude, because his attention was completely absorbed in the problem. There was no mental capacity left over to process external stimuli. His wife would call him for dinner. He wouldn't respond. Students would knock on his office door. He wouldn't notice. His attention was exclusively focused. Explain why this matters. Why does exclusive attention matter? Because divided attention fragments your mental power. Each distraction takes a piece. Each split in focus reduces your effective cognitive capacity. But exclusive attention concentrates everything. All your mental power directed at one target. That's when your mind becomes dangerous. Press make it practical. Fairer, think about a magnifying glass. If you move it around, the light scatters. No fire, but hold it steady, focused exclusively on one spot, and that spot ignites. Your attention works the same way. Keep it moving, keep it divided, and nothing ignites. Hold it steady on one thing, and that thing catches fire. Problems burn away. Insights emerge. Thus, Component 3, deep attention. This is about the level of engagement. Surface level attention versus deep attention. Shallow processing versus deep processing. Explain the differences? Shallow attention is reading words without thinking about meaning, following procedures without understanding principles, consuming information without processing it. Deep attention is engaging fully, questioning everything, connecting to other knowledge, building understanding, really thinking, not just exposing yourself to information. Make the contrast. Most people practice shallow attention most of the time. They're consuming content, skimming articles, half listening to lectures. Superficial engagement. Feynman practiced deep attention. He engaged fully with everything, questioned every statement, challenged every assumption, connected every new idea to existing knowledge, built genuine understanding. If I give examples in Feynman reading a physics paper, he doesn't just read the words, he reconstructs the reasoning. He questions the logic. He tries to derive the equations himself. He looks for flaws. He builds his own understanding from first principles. That's deep attention. Complete engagement, not passive consumption, active construction. Explain why this matters. Deep attention generates insights. Shallow attention just passes information through your mind. In one side, out the other, nothing sticks, nothing transforms. But deep attention transforms information into understanding, creates connections, generates new ideas. That's where real thinking happens. That's where dangerous minds operate. Component 4, recovery and renewal. This might surprise you, but intense focus requires recovery. You can't maintain dangerous level focus indefinitely. You need breaks. You need renewal. Explain. Feynman understood this. He'd work with intense focus for hours, then he'd completely disengage. Play bongos, draw, go to a strip club. Do something completely different that let his mind rest. Not passive rest. Active disengagement, something engaging but different. That allowed his focused mind to recover. Make the point, most people try to stay partially focused all the time. Never intense focus, never complete rest. Just constant moderate attention to everything. Always working, never recovering. That doesn't develop dangerous focus. That creates chronic scattered attention. Mediocre performance, ordinary results. I'd explain the pattern here. The pattern for dangerous focus is intense concentration, then complete disengagement. Not moderate attention with moderate breaks. Intense attention with deep recovery. I'll bring components together. So those are the 4 components. Sustained attention, maintaining focus for extended periods. Exclusive attention, eliminating all distractions. Deep attention, engaging fully, not superficially. Recovery, allowing periods of complete disengagement. Make the promise of master these 4 components, and your ordinary mind becomes dangerous. Capable of solving problems you can't solve now, seeing patterns you miss now, generating insights that seem impossible now. As present, the development process. So how do you develop these components? How do you train your mind to focus with Feynman level intensity? Let me give you the specific practices. The training regimen that builds dangerous focus. Practice one, start with the 20-minute barrier. Most people can't maintain focus for 20 minutes straight. Their mind wanders. They need to check something. They get distracted. So start there. Pick one task, one problem, one thing to think about. Set a timer for 20 minutes. Focus exclusively on that one thing until the timer goes off. Make it concrete, and no phone, no email, no music, no interruptions, just you and the problem. For 20 minutes straight. Your mind will try to wander. Notice when it does. Bring it back. Every time it drifts, bring it back. Train the muscle of sustained attention. Set the progression. Do this daily. Every day, 20 minutes of exclusive focus. After a week, you'll notice it gets easier. Your mind wanders less. Your focus strengthens. Then increase. 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Gradually build your capacity for sustained attention. Share the goal. The goal isn't to focus all day. The goal is to develop the ability to focus intensely when you need to. 2 hours of dangerous focus beats 8 hours of scattered attention. Practice 2. Practice 2. Eliminate decision fatigue about distractions. Every time you resist a distraction, you use willpower. Every time you choose not to check your phone, you make a decision that depletes your mental energy. Present the solution. So don't rely on willpower. Remove the decisions. Make distraction impossible during focus time. Phone in another room. Email closed. Internet off if possible. Notifications disabled. Nothing that requires you to decide. Should I check this? Guthrie explained why, when distraction isn't an option, your mind settles into focus more easily. You're not constantly fighting temptation. You're not making decisions. You're just focusing. Give Feynman an example. Feynman would go to his office, close the door, turn off the phone, make himself unavailable. Not because he had superhuman willpower, because he removed the decisions. Practice 3. Use a focusing ritual. This is powerful. A specific sequence of actions that signals to your brain. No, we focus. Make it concrete, and maybe it's making a cup of tea, sitting in a specific chair, opening a specific notebook. The ritual itself doesn't matter. What matters is consistency. Same ritual, same sequence, every time before focused work. Vassar explained the mechanisms. Over time, your brain learns. The ritual becomes a trigger. It signals, this is focus time. Your mind shifts gears, drops distractions, prepares for deep work. Share Feynman's ritual. Feynman had rituals. Specific ways he'd set up his workspace. Specific times he'd work. Specific conditions he'd create, not superstition. Conditioning, training his brain to enter focus mode. Practice 4. Practice forward. Practice mono. Tasking obsessively. Throughout your day, whatever you're doing, do only that thing. If you're eating, just eat. If you're walking, just walk. If you're talking to someone, just talk to them. Make the point. This trains your brain to focus on one thing. Most people are constantly multitasking. Eating while scrolling, walking while texting, talking while thinking about other things. That fragments attention. Trains your brain to be scattered. Makes sustained focus harder. Show the alternative vibe, but if you practice monotasking obsessively, you train focus. Your brain learns to give full attention to whatever you're doing. That capacity transfers to your focused work. Practice 5. Practice 5. Build your capacity for boredom. This is crucial. Most people can't focus because they can't tolerate boredom. The moment something isn't stimulating, they seek distraction. Explain the problem, but deep focus often feels boring initially. Before insights emerge, before patterns become clear, there's a period where you're just sitting with a problem. Nothing happening. Feels like nothing's working. That's when most people quit. That's when they check their phone. That's when they give up. Show the solution. But that's the critical period. That's when your unconscious mind is processing. That's when deep thinking is happening. You have to sit through the boredom to reach the insight. Lefaris make it practically. So practice tolerating boredom. Sit without stimulation. Let your mind be unstimulated. Don't reach for your phone. Don't seek entertainment. Just sit with nothing. Build your capacity to tolerate non-stimulation. That translates directly to your ability to maintain focus through the boring parts of deep thinking. Vassar, tell transformation story. Let me tell you about someone who developed this skill. Call her Sarah. Sarah was smart, capable, but couldn't focus. Her mind constantly wandered. She'd start working on something, and within 5 minutes, she'd be checking email, scrolling social media. Thinking about other things, she was frustrated. She knew she was capable of more, but couldn't concentrate long enough to achieve it. Ein har share her process, then she learned about Feynman's focus skill, and she started training. 20 minutes a day of sustained, exclusive focus. No exceptions. Every day. First week was brutal. Her mind rebelled, wanted distractions, felt anxious without stimulation. But she persisted. At show the progression. Ism second week was slightly easier. Third week, she increased to 30 minutes. Fourth week, she noticed something. She could focus at will now. When she decided to focus, her mind obeyed. 6 months later, she could maintain intense focus for 2 to 3 hours straight. Not all day, but when she needed to, she could concentrate with dangerous intensity. I share the results. And her work transformed. She solved problems in hours that used to take weeks. She had insights that seemed to come from nowhere. Her productivity multiplied, not because she became smarter, because she learned to focus all her intelligence into a concentrated beam instead of scattering it. Make the universal points. That's available to you. That transformation, that capability, that dangerous focus. You don't need a better brain. You need to learn to focus the brain you have. Address the modern challenge. Now, here's the challenge. The modern world is designed to destroy your focus. Notifications, social media, email messages, news, entertainment, constant stimulation, constant distraction. Your environment is actively fighting your attempts to focus. Assemblers make the stakes clear, and most people surrender. They let their attention be pulled in 1,000 directions. They become scattered, distracted, incapable of dangerous focus. And they wonder why they can't accomplish what they're capable of. Why they can't solve hard problems. Why they can't achieve breakthrough results. Reveal the truth. It's not because they're not smart enough. It's because they can't focus their intelligence long enough or intensely enough to generate real power. At present, the choice was, so you have a choice. You can let the modern world scatter your attention. Make your mind ordinary, harmless, constantly distracted, or you can fight back. Develop dangerous focus. Learn to concentrate your mental energy with intensity that burns through problems. Share Feynman's advantage. This was Feynman's advantage. Not that he was smarter than other physicists. Many physicists had similar intelligence. But Feynman could focus with greater intensity, for longer periods, with deeper engagement. That made the difference. That's what let him solve problems others couldn't. Not more intelligence. Better focus. Make it personally, and you have access to the same advantage. You can develop the same skill. You can train your mind to focus with the same dangerous intensity. Present the commitment, but it requires commitment. It requires practice. It requires saying no to distractions. It requires training your attention like an athlete trains their body. Sex give the challenge. So here's my challenge. Starting today, practice dangerous focus 20 minutes. One task, exclusive attention, no distractions, every single day for 30 days. Can her make the prediction? Do that, and you'll feel the difference. Your mind will become sharper, more capable, more powerful. Problems you struggle with now will crack open. Insights will emerge. Results will improve. Not because you got smarter, because you learned to focus your intelligence. A shared, deeper principle. Here's the deeper principle. Most people never use their full mental capacity. Not because they don't have it, but because they never focus it. It's like having a powerful flashlight but never turning it on. The power is there, but it's not being used. Let me just make the analogy. Dangerous focus is turning on the flashlight, pointing it at one spot, maintaining that beam, and watching what illuminates. Suddenly you see things you missed before. Patterns become clear. Problems become solvable. Not because you got a better flashlight, because you turned on the one you have. Give final Feynman example. Late in Feynman's life, someone asks him, "What's your secret? How do you solve impossible problems?" And he gives an answer that sounds too simple. I think about them until they become possible, with complete focus, for as long as it takes. Pause it. That's the secret. That's the skill. Complete focus, maintained until results emerge. Not genius. Focus. Walk to center. You have an ordinary mind, same as everyone else, same cognitive capacity, same potential. The difference between ordinary and dangerous isn't inherent, it's developed. It's the focus skill. ACOG direct address so develop it. Train it. Build your capacity for sustained, exclusive, deep attention. Learn to concentrate your mental energy into a focused beam. has to make the promise of do that, and your ordinary mind becomes dangerous, capable of solving problems that seem impossible now, seeing insights that are invisible now, achieving results that feel out of reach now. Far final statement, the sun is always shining. The energy is always there. The question is, will you scatter it into harmlessness or focus it into fire? Your mind has the power. The question is, will you develop the skill to focus that power? Pause, make your mind dangerous. Develop the focus skill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Be at Ting, and if you want to understand more about how Feynman trained his mind, how he developed not just focus, but all the cognitive skills that made him exceptional, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring the actual mental training that creates exceptional capability. Not motivation, not inspiration, actual skill development. Join us. Let's build dangerous minds together. See you in the next one. But one of them is heavy, filled with obligations, with shoulds, with work you have to do whether you want to or not. Work that drains you. Work that feels like burden. Work that steals your life. Hold up the other one. This one is light, filled with things you choose, with wants, with work you do because it interests you, work that energizes you, work that feels like freedom, work that enriches your life. So put them down as most people spend their entire lives carrying the heavy briefcase. They call it responsibility. They call it adulting. They call it, that's just how life is. And they're exhausted, burned out, resentful, dreaming of retirement when they can finally stop carrying the weight. Far direct address, but there's a different way. A way Richard Feynman discovered. A way where work becomes optional. Not because you're rich, not because you don't work, but because you've applied a single rule that transforms your relationship with work. A rule so simple it sounds too easy to work, but so powerful that once you apply it, you'll never feel trapped by work again. Learn With Feynman today, I'm going to reveal that rule. The freedom rule that makes work optional. And I'm going to show you exactly how to apply it to your life, starting immediately. Because the difference between carrying the heavy briefcase and the light one isn't what you do. It's how you think about what you do. And that can change today, right now, this moment. I'll walk across stage. Let me start with a story. This story reveals everything about the freedom rule. It's 1951. Feynman is at Cornell. He's depressed. Seriously depressed. Not sad, not down. Clinically depressed to the point where he's considering leaving physics entirely. Why? Because work has become work. Heavy. Obligatory. Something he has to do instead of wants to do. Vakra explained the situation. He's just won recognition for his war work. He has tenure, he has expectations. He has responsibilities. People expect him to do important physics, solve important problems, publish important papers. And the moment work became something he had to do, something with expectations and obligations, it became unbearable. The joy disappeared. The curiosity died. Work became work. Share his crisis hour, he sits in his office, staring at physics problems, feeling nothing, no interest, no drive, just obligation. I should work on this. I'm supposed to solve this. People expect me to do this? Expected. The language of obligation. The language of the heavy briefcase, and he can't do it. He's paralyzed. Not by lack of ability, by lack of freedom. Work has become prison. The turning point then something happens. He's in the cafeteria. A student throws a plate in the air. The plate wobbles as it spins. And Feynman notices something interesting about the wobble. And for the first time in months, he feels curious. Interested. Not because he should study the wobble. Not because anyone expects him to. But because it's interesting. Share what he does, so he goes to his office. And he works on the wobbling plate. Just for fun. Just because it interests him. No expectations. No obligations. No should. And the depression lifts. Work becomes play again. Physics becomes exciting again. He's free again. Reveal what happens and not because the work changed, but because his relationship to the work changed. He stopped doing what he should do and started doing what he wanted to do. He applied the freedom rule, and work became optional, not in the sense that he stopped working, but in the sense that work became choice instead of obligation. Arthur make the point. That's the freedom rule. That's the thing that makes work optional. And once you understand it, once you really get it, your entire relationship with work transforms. Direct statement, here's the rule. Never do anything you don't want to do. For pause, let that land wait. That sounds irresponsible, impractical. Impossible. How can you never do anything you don't want to do? Life has obligations, bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, things you have to do whether you want to or not. Address the objection. But here's what Feynman understood. Here's the deep truth that makes this rule actually work. You're already choosing everything you do. Right now. Today. Every have to is actually a choice. Every obligation is something you're choosing to fulfill. Every should is something you're deciding to do. Farn, make it concrete here. You don't have to go to work. You're choosing to go to work because you want the money more than you want to skip work. That's a choice, your choice. You don't have to pay your bills. You're choosing to pay your bills because you want electricity and shelter more than you want to keep the money. That's a choice. Your choice. You don't have to do anything. You're choosing to do everything. The question is, are you aware you're choosing? Or are you pretending you have no choice? Asn't present the distinction. That's the distinction. That's what makes work optional. When you pretend you have no choice, when you say, I have to do this, work is heavy. It's obligation. It's burden. It's prison. But when you acknowledge you're choosing, when you say, I'm choosing to do this, work becomes light. It's freedom. It's agency. It's optional. Pause, same work, same tasks, different relationship to it, different experience of it. Asher shared deeper explanation, so let me show you exactly how this works. Why acknowledging choice transforms everything. When you say, I have to do this, you're in victim mode. Something external is forcing you. You have no power. You're trapped. You're at the mercy of circumstances. Make the impact clear. And that feels terrible. That creates resentment. That drains energy. That makes work feel like burden. You're doing the thing, but you're fighting it internally. Part of you is saying, I don't want to do this. I shouldn't have to do this. This isn't fair. That internal resistance is what makes work heavy. Show the alternative, but when you say, I'm choosing to do this, you're in agent mode. You're making a decision. You have power. You're free. You're acting according to your values. Fate continue, and that feels completely different. Even if the task is exactly the same, even if it's something you don't particularly enjoy, the experience is transformed because you're not fighting it, you're not resenting it. You're doing it as a conscious choice aligned with what you value. Give concrete example. Let's make this concrete. You're going to work. Same commute, same job, same tasks. Mindset 1, I have to go to work. I have no choice. I'm trapped. I'd rather be doing something else, but I can't. How does that feel? Heavy, resentful, draining. Alternative mindset 2. I'm choosing to go to work because I value having money to support my family. I'm choosing this over sleeping in because financial security matters to me. This is my choice. How does that feel? Lighter, empowered, energizing. Make the point. Same work, same commute.
Same job.
Different relationship to it, different experience of it. The work didn't become optional in the sense that you stopped doing it. The work became optional in the sense that you're choosing it. And choice is freedom. Share Feynman's application. This is what Feynman did after his depression. He made everything optional, everything a choice. He'd get an invitation to give a lecture, and he'd ask himself, do I want to do this? Not should I. Not am I supposed to. Do I want to? If yes, he'd do it. If no, he'd decline. Simple. Fred continues. Someone would ask him to serve on a committee. Do I want to do this? No. Decline. Someone would offer him a prestigious position. Do I want to do this? No. Decline. Someone would present him with an interesting physics problem. Do I want to do this? Yes. Accept. Make the point of as everything became optional, everything became choice. He only did what he wanted to do. And you know what? He was more productive, more creative, more successful. Because when you only do what you want to do, you have energy, you have enthusiasm, you have engagement. Address the objection. Now, some of you are thinking, that's fine for Feynman. He was a Nobel Prize winner. He had freedom. He could say no to things I can't. I have to do things I don't want to do. Answer directly if no. You're choosing to do things you've decided you should do. There's a difference. Let me show you how to apply this rule even when you think you can't. Even when you think you have to do something. Present the framework. When you encounter something you have to do, use this process. Step 1. Acknowledge it's a choice. I'm choosing to do this instead of I have to do this. And step 2, identify why you're choosing it. I'm choosing this because What do you value that makes this choice worthwhile? Step 3, decide if that reason is worth it. Is what you're getting from this choice worth what you're giving up? Make it concrete with example. You have to attend a boring meeting at work. Let's apply the process. Step 1, I'm choosing to attend this meeting. Step 2, I'm choosing this because I value keeping my job, and attending meetings is part of keeping my job, and keeping my job gives me income that supports my family. Or step 3, is that worth it? Is sitting through this boring meeting worth the income that supports my family? Yes. Okay. Then I choose this. 6, show the transformation. This year is now you're in the meeting, but you're not resentful. You're not thinking, I have to be here. This is terrible. I'm trapped. You're thinking, I'm choosing to be here. This is part of how I support my family. That's worth it to me. Make the point A, same meeting, same boredom, different experience, because you've shifted from victim mode, I have to agent mode, I'm choosing to. Fav, give another example. You have to do your taxes. Let's apply the process. Step 1, I'm choosing to do my taxes. Step 2, I'm choosing this because I value not going to prison and not having my wages garnished, and doing my taxes prevents those outcomes. Step 3, is that worth it? Is spending a few hours on taxes worth avoiding prison and wage garnishment? Yes, absolutely. I choose this. 5, show the shift. Now you're doing your taxes. But you're not thinking, this is terrible. I hate this. Why do I have to do this? You're thinking, I'm choosing to do this because I value freedom and financial stability. This is worth a few hours of my time. Here, make the deeper point to see what happened. The task didn't change. Taxes are still taxes, but boring meetings are still boring. But your relationship to the task changed, from obligation to choice, from burden to agency, from heavy to light. Sec, present the radical application. Now let me show you the radical application of this rule. This is where it gets really powerful. Sometimes, when you apply this process, you'll realize, actually, no, this isn't worth it. I don't want to do this. The cost is higher than the benefit. Continue, and then you have a real choice. You can stop doing it. You can say no. You can find a different way. Well, sir, give example. You're working a job you hate. You've been telling yourself, I have to do this job. I have no choice. I'm trapped. Apply the process. Step 1, I'm choosing to work this job. Step 2, I'm choosing this because I value the income, the health insurance, the retirement benefits. Step 3, is this worth it? At the turning point, and maybe you realize, no, actually, this isn't worth it. The income isn't worth the misery. The benefits aren't worth hating every day. The security isn't worth feeling dead inside. What happens next are, now you have real clarity. You're not trapped. You're choosing. And you're choosing something that's not worth it to you, so you can make a different choice. Find a different job, change careers, start a business, reduce expenses, whatever. But the key is, you're not trapped. You were never trapped. You were choosing. And now you're aware of it, so you can choose differently. Richard Feynman example. Feynman did this multiple times. He'd realize he was doing things that weren't worth it to him. Things he'd said yes to out of obligation or expectation. And he'd stop. He'd walk away. He'd say no. Foster's specific example, he was offered the position of head of the physics department at Caltech. Prestigious, important, well paid. He applied the process. Do I want to do this? What would I value about this? The prestige, the power, the money. And he realized none of that is worth the administrative work. None of that is worth the meetings in politics and bureaucracy. So he said no, turned it down, stayed a regular professor, kept his freedom. I've make the point said most people would have said, I have to accept this. It's too good to turn down. People expect me to say yes. But Feynman asked, do I want this? Is it worth it to me? And when the answer was no, he said no, because work is optional. Everything is optional. It's all choice. She present the deeper principle. Here's the deeper principle that makes this work. You can't control what situations you face, but you can always control how you relate to those situations. Explain life will present you with constraints, bills to pay, responsibilities to meet, circumstances to navigate. You can't make all of that disappear, but you can choose how you think about it, victim or agent, trapped or choosing, have to or want to, make the distinction, two people in identical situations, same job, same bills, same responsibilities. Person 1, I have to do all this, I'm trapped, I have no choice, life is burden. Person 2, I'm choosing all this. These are my values expressed through my choices. I'm free. Fa asked the question, who has a better experience? Who feels more energized? Who's carrying the heavy briefcase and who's carrying the light one? Ars has answer person 2. Not because their situation is different, but because their relationship to the situation is different. Ver share the transformation. Let me tell you about someone who applied this. Call him Marcus. Marcus worked in corporate finance, hated it, dreaded Monday mornings, lived for weekends, counted down to retirement. Classic heavy briefcase. I have to do this job. I have to pay my mortgage. I have to support my family. I'm trapped. The change then he learned about Feynman's freedom rule, and he tried something. He started applying the process. I'm choosing to work this job. I'm choosing to pay this mortgage. I'm choosing to support my family in this way. A why. What did he value about these choices? His realization, and he realized he valued financial security. He valued providing for his family. He valued the lifestyle his income enabled. Were those worth the job he didn't love? He thought about it. Really thought about it. Ours his decision, and he decided yes, for now. Supporting his family in this way was worth doing work he didn't love. That was his choice, his values, his decision. As the transformation, and something shifted. Monday mornings weren't quite as dreadful. The work wasn't quite as heavy, because he wasn't a victim anymore. He was making a choice aligned with his values. The deeper change, but also, and this is important, because he'd acknowledged it was a choice, he stayed open to other choices. He wasn't locked in. He wasn't trapped. He was choosing this for now, but he could choose differently later. What happened next? 2 years later, that's what he did. He found a way to reduce expenses, build up savings, and transition to work he genuinely enjoyed. Same income, but work he actually wanted to do. And I can make the point, none of that would have happened if he'd stayed in victim mode. I have to do this. I'm trapped. That mindset keeps you stuck. But I'm choosing this for now, and I can choose differently later. That mindset opens possibilities. That mindset creates freedom. If I address another application, let me show you another application. This one is about relationships. You're in a relationship. And there are things about it that are difficult. Things you don't particularly enjoy. Things you'd rather not deal with. The victim mindset, I have to deal with this. I'm stuck with this person. I have no choice. How does that feel? Resentful, trapped. Heavy. The freedom mindset. I'm choosing to stay in this relationship. I'm choosing to work through these difficulties because I value this person and what we have together more than I value avoiding these difficulties. How does that feel? Empowered, committed, light. Fisi make the distinction, same relationship, same difficulties, different experience, because one is choice and one is obligation. The profound impact, and here's what's powerful, when you acknowledge you're choosing the relationship, you stop resenting it. You stop feeling trapped. You show up differently. You engage differently. And often the relationship itself improves. Because you're no longer bringing resentment and victimhood into it. You're bringing choice and agency. Present the practices. So here's the practice. Here's how to make work optional. How to carry the light briefcase instead of the heavy one. Every time you catch yourself thinking, I have to do this, stop. Replace it with, I'm choosing to do this because. Fill in the because. What do you value that makes this choice worthwhile? Ask and give the questions. If you can fill it in, if you can identify what you value about this choice, then own it. You're choosing this. It's not obligation. It's expression of your values through choice. If you can't fill it in, if you realize you're only doing it out of obligation or expectation or habit, then you have information. Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe you can make a different choice. Share the categories. Let me give you the categories where this applies. Work. I'm choosing this job because I value the income and what it provides. Relationships. I'm choosing this relationship because I value this person and what we have together. Responsibilities. I'm choosing to fulfill this responsibility because I value being reliable and trustworthy. Health. I'm choosing to exercise because I value energy and longevity more than I value comfort right now. Make the point, everything is choice. Everything is optional. The question is, are you aware you're choosing? And are your choices aligned with what you actually value? Share the paradox. Here's the paradox: when you make everything optional, When you acknowledge everything is choice, you often end up doing more, not less. Why? Because you have energy, you have engagement. You're not dragging yourself through obligations. You're choosing actions aligned with your values. To give Feynman an example, when Feynman made work optional, he only did what he wanted to do. And he worked harder and accomplished more than most people who felt obligated to work. Because his work was choice, was play, was freedom, was expression of his curiosity. Abraham make the universal point. That's available to you too. That transformation, that freedom, that experience of work becoming optional, not by quitting everything, not by becoming irresponsible, but by acknowledging that everything you do is already your choice, and owning that choice, and aligning your choices with your values. Fry address final objection, one final objection. But what if I genuinely don't want to do something but I have to for survival? Like work a terrible job to pay rent.
Answer.
Firsty, even then, it's a choice. You're choosing survival. You're choosing shelter. Those are values. Own that choice. I'm choosing this terrible job because I value having a place to live. That's worth it to me right now. Here, Sant, continue a secondy. Acknowledge it's a choice for now, not forever. I'm choosing this for now while I figure out alternatives. That keeps you in agent mode. That keeps you looking for better options. That keeps you free even in difficult circumstances. Final point, the moment you say, I have to and I'll always have to, that's when you're truly trapped. Not by circumstances, by your mindset, by your belief that you have no choice. But you always have choice. Even if it's just choosing how you relate to circumstances, you can't immediately change. I walk to center. So here's the freedom rule that makes work optional. Never do anything you don't want to do. Not by avoiding responsibility, but by acknowledging that everything you do is already your choice, and owning that choice, and aligning your choices with your values. Work make it practical, P. Starting today, catch yourself every time you say, I have to. Replace it with, I'm choosing to. Fill in why. What do you value about this choice? Shake the promise to do this consistently, and work becomes optional. Not in the sense that you stop working, but in the sense that work becomes choice instead of obligation. The briefcase doesn't get heavier or lighter based on what's in it. It gets heavier or lighter based on whether you're carrying it as burden or carrying it as choice. Final statement. You're already carrying it. You're already doing the work. You're already meeting the responsibilities. The only question is, will you carry it as victim or as agent? As trap or as choice? As heavy or as light?
Choose light. Choose freedom.
Choose agency. Make work optional by acknowledging you're already choosing it. Thank you. And if you want to understand more about how Feynman lived with radical freedom, how he made every part of his life optional through conscious choice, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how to live with agency, with choice, with freedom, not by escaping responsibility, but by owning it. Join us. Let's choose freedom together. See you in the next one. Same equations, same concepts, same knowledge. But if I gave one to a genius and one to an average student, the genius would understand it completely while the student would memorize words without understanding anything. Why? Not because the genius is smarter, not because they have better memory, not because they work harder, because the genius uses a different language rule. A rule so simple it sounds stupid. A rule so obvious it gets ignored. A rule that completely changes how information transforms into understanding. If I put books down, Richard Feynman discovered this rule, not in a lab, not through formal study, but through frustration. Through watching brilliant students memorize complex terminology while understanding nothing. Through seeing education systems teach words instead of ideas. That's a direct address, and that rule, that single rule, is why he could explain quantum mechanics to anyone. Why his lectures became legendary. Why he understood physics more deeply than people who'd studied longer. Why he could solve problems others couldn't touch. Today, I'm going to reveal that language rule, the rule geniuses use. The rule schools completely ignore. And I'm going to show you how to use it yourself. You lean in here because right now you're probably using language the way schools taught you. The way that creates memorization without understanding. The way that lets you sound smart while knowing nothing. The way that wastes years of your life learning words instead of ideas. And once you see the rule, once you understand what geniuses do differently, You'll never use language the same way again. Walk across stage. Let me start with the story that reveals everything. It's the 1950s. Feynman is in Brazil, teaching physics at the University of Rio, and he's shocked by what he discovers. The students are brilliant. They can recite complex physics terminology flawlessly. They ace exams. They get perfect scores on tests that would destroy American students. And they understand absolutely nothing. Plot build the scene. Feynman gives them a problem, a simple problem. Apply the physics concepts they've been studying to a real-world situation. Something that requires understanding, not just memorization. And they can't do it all. They're completely lost. Feynman shares his confusion, so he investigates. How is this possible? They know all the terminology. They can define every term. They can recite the principles. What's missing? And he discovers something devastating. They've learned words without meanings. They can say coefficient of friction, but they don't know what friction is. They can recite Brewster's angle, but they have no idea what it describes. Price make the point they've been taught to memorize language, technical language, impressive language, the language of physics. But nobody taught them what that language actually refers to, what it means, what reality it describes. And that's what revealed the discovery. And that's when Feynman realizes there's a rule about language that makes all the difference. A rule he's been using instinctively. A rule these students never learned. A rule schools actively violate. Hunter present the rule is this: never learn a word without learning what it points to. Pause, let it land, that's it. That's the rule. Sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? But this simple rule is the difference between genius, level understanding, and educated ignorance. Between actually knowing something and just being able to talk about it. I first explain deeper. Here's what most people do, what schools teach you to do. You learn words, you learn definitions, you learn terminology, you memorize what things are called. Photosynthesis is the process by which plants convert light energy into chemical energy. You memorize that, you can recite it, you know the word, you know the definition. But do you understand photosynthesis? Do you know what's actually happening? Could you explain it without using the word photosynthesis? Could you describe the actual process? How make the distinction? In most people can't. Because they learned the word without learning what it points to. They know the label without knowing the thing. That's not understanding. That's vocabulary. And vocabulary isn't knowledge. Hake share what geniuses do but geniuses, Feynman, Einstein, all of them, they refuse to learn words without meanings. They refuse to memorize terminology without understanding what it refers to. When they encounter a word, they don't just learn the definition. They learn what the word points to, the actual phenomenon, the real thing, the concrete reality behind the abstract label. Faster give examples. Feynman encounters the term electromagnetic radiation. He doesn't just memorize electromagnetic radiation is energy that travels through space as waves. He asks, what is this actually? What's really happening? What would I see if I could see it? How does it work? What's the mechanism? He builds a mental picture, an understanding, a model of the actual phenomenon, and only then does the word electromagnetic radiation mean something to him. Make the contrast. The word doesn't mean a definition. The word means the actual thing it points to, the real phenomenon, the concrete reality. That's the rule. Never learn a word without learning what it points to. At present, the problem with schools, and schools violate this rule constantly. Systematically, they teach words without meanings, labels without reference, definitions without understanding. I've give examples by biology class. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. You memorize that. You can recite it on the test. But what does it mean? What's actually happening? How do mitochondria produce energy? What's the mechanism? Schools don't teach that. They teach the label, the slogan, the word. I continue in history class. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919. You memorize that. But what was the Treaty of Versailles? What did it say? Why did it matter? What were the actual consequences? Schools teach dates and names, not what those dates and names refer to. Continue math class. The quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You memorize that. But what is it for? When do you use it? Why does it work? What problem does it solve? Schools teach formulas, not what formulas mean or why they exist. Make the devastating point, or schools teach language, just language, words, terms, definitions, labels. and they call that education. But it's not education, it's vocabulary training, and vocabulary without understanding is worse than useless, because it creates the illusion of knowledge while providing none. Share the consequences. This is why people can have degrees and understand nothing, why students can pass exams and fail to apply knowledge, why education often doesn't transfer to real-world capability, because they learned words without learning what words point to. They have vocabulary without understanding, labels without meanings present the solutioning. So how do you use the language rule? How do you learn like a genius instead of like a student? Let me give you the specific practices, the ways to ensure you're learning what words point to, not just the words themselves. Practice 1E. Practice 1. Explain without using the word. This is Feynman's signature move. Take any concept. Try to explain it without using the technical term for it. Make it concrete. Explain photosynthesis without using the word photosynthesis. If you can do it, if you can describe what's actually happening using simple words, you understand it. You know what the word points to. But if you can't, if you need the technical term to explain it, you don't understand. You just know vocabulary. Give example. Feynman explaining electromagnetic radiation. There's this thing where electric and magnetic fields kind of dance together, creating waves that move through space. These waves carry energy. When they hit stuff, they can make things happen. Light is one kind of these waves. No fancy terminology, simple words. But the understanding is there. He knows what electromagnetic radiation actually is, not just what it's called. Make the test. Can you explain the concepts you think you know without using their technical names? Try it. You'll discover how much is vocabulary and how much is actual understanding. Practice 2. Practice 2. Connect to concrete examples. Every concept, every word, every idea, connect it to something concrete, something real, something you can point to or picture or experience. Abstract words without concrete connections are empty. They're just sounds, meaningless. Make it concrete. Entropy is an abstract word. Doesn't mean much by itself, but connect it. When you drop food coloring in water, it spreads out. It never unspreads. That's spreading, that tendency toward disorder. That's entropy. Now the word means something. It points to something real, something you can visualize and understand. Give Feynman example. If Feynman always connected abstract concepts to concrete examples. Energy wasn't just a definition. It was balls rolling down hills, springs compressing, water falling, heat flowing. Concrete things he could point to. Those connections made the word energy mean something real instead of just being an abstract term. Can make the practice for every word. Find concrete examples. What does this word point to in the real world? Where can I see this? What's an example I can touch or visualize or experience? Without concrete connections, words are just empty sounds. Practice 3 to ask, what would I see? This is powerful. When you encounter a word or concept, ask, I could see this happening. What would I see? Force yourself to visualize the actual phenomenon, not the definition, the thing itself. What is electricity? Don't recite the definition. Ask, if I could see electricity moving through a wire, what would I see? Electrons moving, little charged particles flowing, like water through a pipe, but these are particles with charge. That's understanding. That's knowing what the word points to. Hard continue quiz. What is evolution? Don't recite Darwin. Ask, if I watched evolution happening over thousands of generations, what would I see? I'd see small changes accumulating. Individuals with slightly better traits having more offspring. The population gradually shifting over time. That's understanding. That's the actual phenomenon, not just the label. I give Feynman's practice a. Feynman did this constantly. He'd build mental movies of what was happening. Electrons bouncing, atoms vibrating, forces pushing, actual things doing actual things. The words were just pointers to those movies. The understanding was in the movies, not the words. Practice 4. Explain to a child. This is the ultimate test. Can you explain this concept to a 10-year-old? Using only words they'd understand, without jargon. If yes, you understand it. If no, you just know vocabulary. Why explain why this works? Children don't know technical terms. They don't have the vocabulary. So you can't hide behind jargon. You can't use fancy words to fake understanding. You have to actually know what you're talking about. Know what the concept points to. Know the real thing behind the label. Give example explaining quantum mechanics to a child. Really tiny things like atoms behave weirdly. They can be in two places at once, kind of. They're fuzzy instead of definite. They only become definite when you look at them. Is that complete? No. Is it perfectly accurate? No. But it captures something real about the phenomenon. It points to the actual weirdness, not just uses the label. Monsieur Hart make the point. If you can explain something to a child, really explain it, not just simplify the jargon, you understand it. Because you know what it points to, not just what it's called. Practice 5C, practice 5A, build from first principles. Don't accept definitions. Build up from basics, from things you already understand. Connect new words to existing understanding. Make it concrete-ish. Acceleration doesn't start as a definition. It starts as, when you're in a car and it speeds up, you feel pushed back in your seat. That's acceleration. The change in how fast you're going. That's concrete. That's experiential. That's connected to something you already know. Then you can build on it. Acceleration is change in velocity. Velocity is speed with direction. Change in speed or change in direction. Both are acceleration. Now the word has meaning. It points to something you can feel and understand. Except Richard Feynman example of Feynman built everything from first principles. He never just accepted definitions. He'd start with the simplest things he knew and build up, connect, extend, create understanding from the ground up. That's why his understanding was so deep, because every word, every concept was connected to a foundation of actual understanding, not just sitting on top of memorized definitions. Bring together the practices. So those are 5 practices. Explain without using the word. Connect to concrete examples. Ask, what would I see? Explain to a child. Build from first principles. Make the promises, use these practices, and you'll learn like a genius. You'll understand deeply instead of memorizing superficially. You'll know what words point to instead of just knowing the words. Tell transformation story. Let me tell you about a student who discovered this rule. Call Lisa. Lisa was pre-med, memorizing everything. Thousands of terms, definitions, technical vocabulary, getting good grades because she could recite everything perfectly. But she didn't understand medicine. She knew the language of medicine, but not what that language referred to. Then she started clinical rotations, real patients, real situations, and she was lost. She knew the terms. Congestive heart failure, a myocardial infarction, pulmonary edema. She could define them all. But what were they? What was actually happening in the body? What would she see? What should she do? She didn't know. She'd learned words without learning what they pointed to. The discovery, then she learned about Feynman's language rule, and she started over, relearning medicine. But this time learning what words pointed to, not just the words. Her practice, congestive heart failure. What is that? Not the definition. What's actually happening? The heart isn't pumping strongly enough. Blood backs up. Fluid accumulates in lungs and tissues. The patient can't breathe well. Their ankles swell. Now she understood. The words pointed to something real. Something she could visualize. Something she could work with. Has the transformation, as she did this with everything, every medical term, connect to concrete reality. Visualize what's happening. Build understanding, not just vocabulary, and her clinical performance transformed. She went from lost to competent, from memorizing to understanding, from reciting terms to actually knowing what was happening in patients' bodies. The result, 3 years later, she's one of the best residents in her program, not because she memorizes better, because she understands deeply, because she learned what words point to instead of just learning words. Make the universal point that's available to you. That transformation, that shift from vocabulary to understanding, that ability to actually know instead of just being able to talk about things. Address deeper implications. Now let me show you why this rule matters beyond just learning, why it's about clear thinking, not just education. Or the confusion problem. When you learn words without meanings, you create confusion, in yourself and others, in entire fields of study, because you can talk about things without knowing what you're talking about. You can use impressive language while meaning nothing. You can create the appearance of knowledge without substance. Give example. Someone says, one need to leverage our synergies to optimize stakeholder engagement. That sounds smart. Uses business terminology, but what does it mean? What's the actual thing being suggested? Strip away the jargon. Most should work together better to keep people happy. Was all that fancy language necessary? No, it was hiding the absence of specific ideas. Make the point, this happens everywhere. In business, in academia, in politics. In any field where people can use jargon without meaning, they're violating the language rule. Using words without knowing what they point to. And it creates confusion, not clarity. Give Feynman's approach. Feynman refused to do this. If he couldn't explain something simply, if he needed jargon to discuss it, he assumed he didn't understand it, and he was usually right. The need for jargon usually signals lack of understanding. Real understanding can be expressed simply. Barzar, the communication problem. When you use words without knowing what they point to, you can't communicate. You can exchange words, but you're not sharing understanding. Give example, two people talking about quantum entanglement, both using the term, both nodding, both feeling like they're having a conversation. But ask them to explain without jargon. Ask them what they're actually talking about, and often they realize they weren't communicating at all, just exchanging words without shared understanding. Mayer make the point, real communication requires knowing what words point to, requires shared understanding of the actual things being discussed, not just shared vocabulary. But let's give the diagnostic. If you're using jargon and the conversation feels empty, if you're exchanging words but not ideas, that's a sign you're violating the language rule. Stop using the fancy words. Try to express the actual ideas simply. Often you'll discover there weren't any actual ideas, just vocabulary. Through the thinking problem, most critically, when you use words without knowing what they point to, you can't think. Not really. Not effectively. Thinking requires manipulating ideas. You can't manipulate words. Words are just labels. You need to manipulate the things the words point to. Make it concrete as, you can't think about mitochondria if mitochondria is just a word to you. You can only think about the actual cellular structures and processes that word refers to. The thinking happens with the things, not the words. The words are just convenient labels for referring to things while you think about them. Awesome give Feynman example. Feynman thought in pictures, in mechanisms, in processes, not in words. When he solved problems, he wasn't manipulating terminology. He was manipulating his understanding of actual phenomena. The words were just labels he used after the thinking was done. Haders make the warning if your thinking feels like you're just rearranging words, just shuffling terminology around. You're not really thinking. You're just playing with labels. Real thinking requires knowing what the labels point to, manipulating the actual ideas, not just the words. Sachs addressed the sophistication trap. There's a trap here, a big one. The trap of mistaking sophisticated language for sophisticated thinking. Eufax explained the trap fee using fancy words feels smart, sounds impressive, makes you seem knowledgeable. So there's enormous social pressure to use jargon, to adopt technical terminology, to sound sophisticated. But sophistication of language doesn't equal sophistication of thought. Often it's the opposite. Our set give the insight, the smartest people, Feynman, Einstein, Hawking, they explain complex ideas simply. They didn't need fancy language because they understood deeply. Their sophistication was in the ideas, not the words. Less smart people. They use fancy language to hide lack of understanding. They adopt jargon to sound knowledgeable without being knowledgeable. Tertiary make the test. If someone can't explain their ideas simply, they probably don't understand them. They've learned impressive words without learning what those words point to. Aksha share final Feynman story. Late in his career, Feynman is at a physics conference. Famous physicists presenting their latest work, using extremely technical language, impressively sophisticated terminology. And Feynman keeps asking, but what does that mean? What's actually happening? Can you explain it without the jargon? Sachs continues, most of them can't. They've learned to speak the language of physics without understanding what that language points to. They can manipulate equations without knowing what the equations describe. And Feynman exposes this, not to embarrass them, but because he genuinely can't follow discussions based on words without meanings. The lesson, he needed to know what words pointed to. Otherwise, they were just sounds, just noise, just empty labels with nothing behind them. That's the language rule in action. That insistence on knowing what words point to, not just knowing words. Walk to center so here's the rule. Never learn a word without learning what it points to. Make it practical. Starting today, apply this rule. Every time you encounter a new word, a new concept, a new term, don't just memorize the definition. Ask, what does this point to? What's the actual thing? What would I see? How would I explain this simply? What's a concrete example? Make the promise do this consistently, and your understanding will deepen dramatically. You'll stop accumulating vocabulary and start building knowledge. You'll stop sounding smart and start actually being smart. The challenge to take one field you think you know, one area where you use impressive terminology, and test yourself. Can you explain the key concepts without using the jargon? Can you describe what those fancy words actually point to? Can you explain it to a child? Make the prediction. You'll probably discover you know less than you thought. Much of what you considered knowledge is just vocabulary, labels without meanings, words without reference. But that discovery is good, because now you can go back and learn properly. Learn what words point to. Build real understanding instead of fake sophistication. Final statement: color. The language rule geniuses use. Never learn a word without learning what it points to. Schools ignore this rule. They teach vocabulary without understanding, labels without meanings, words without reference. Direct addressio. But you don't have to learn that way. You can use the genius rule. You can insist on understanding what words point to before you use them. Epasi, that's the difference between sounding educated and being educated. Between knowing words and knowing things. Between vocabulary and understanding. Avier Smiley used the rule. Know what words point to. Build real understanding. Thank you. And if you want to understand more about how Feynman thought, how he used language, how he built understanding, how he learned so deeply, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're exploring how to think clearly, how to learn genuinely, how to understand deeply instead of just memorizing impressively. Join us. Let's use the language rule together. See you in the next one.